Hey, this is Hans from Dakota Angler and Outfitter. In this video we're tying a Vis-a-Dun, a versatile dry fly pattern that can be used for many different mayfly species by just changing the color to match the natural. I have a standard dry fly hook in the vise. I've got 70 denier ultra thread. I'm going to start behind the eye, wrap back about halfway on the hook shank, get rid of my excess thread just by popping it off there. Spiral forward a few wraps, so I'm about at the 1/3 point. I'm going to take a clump of Dun colored poly yarn. And this is going to be the wing of the fly. And I want about I want my wing to be about the length of the hook shank. So I'm going to measure that clump against the length of the hook shank. Looks about right. Slide up to the tying point, tie-in point, tie that down, wrap back a few wraps, and then trim off the excess at an angle. Go ahead and cover up the remaining butts there. A little fiber that wants to hang on, but we'll trim him out. Now I'll take the wing and fold it up. Throw a bunch of thread wraps in front to keep it nice and high. There we go. You can even just throw one or two little wraps around the base to keep those fibers bundled. We'll slide back to the back of the hook, take our thread back as far as the barb. We'll take some Hackle fibers for our tail. I'm using fibers from a Coq de Leon tailing pack from Whiting. And I've got a nice bundle, probably 12 fibers. I'm going to measure those against the hook shank, so I got about a hook shank's length. Switch hands and bring them to the tie-in point. Tie those on top of the hook, let them kind of loosely roll until they get right on top, and then tighten up your thread. Advance my thread up to about where the butts of the poly yarn ends. Trim off my excess. Cover the last little bit of those up. And then I'll go back to my tail. If you want to fan these out and make it a little wider, you can just push on them with your thumbnail. And then if you want to divide them into clumps, which stabilizes the fly, just kind of find about an equal number for each side, and then come up between the fibers with one wrap of thread, put a couple wraps on the hook shank, split them one more time, and go then down through the middle. Oops. There we go. Go back onto the hook shank with a couple of wraps. And there we have it. I will slide back up to the front, and just behind the wing, about an equal distance between the wing and the eye. So that distance there, we're going to go that far behind the wing. We're going to tie in a hackle feather. You can either use neck hackle or saddle hackle. Stripped away a little bit of the stem, and I want the dull side of the hackle facing me when I tie this in. It's a little hard to see on the camera, but if you look at your hackle, you'll notice one side's duller and the other is kind of a shinier and darker. We want that down, and we want the dull side facing. At that spot, we're going to tie in our hackle. Make sure it's nice and locked in. sneak behind the hackle, back to the tie-in point for the tail. At this point, we're going to load up our thread with dubbing. You can use any dry fly dubbing you like. I'm going to use a fine natural dubbing from Nature Spirit. One thing about this is I'm going to take my clump of dubbing and before I start twisting it on the thread, I'm gonna have a clump that's thinner at the top and gets thicker as it goes down. And that means as I twist it onto my thread, I'll build a taper. So the noodle of dubbing that's on my thread will be fine, closest to the hook, and get thicker farther down the thread. And that'll help build a natural taper as I go forward. Slide my clump of dubbing up right in front of the tails, and we'll start working forward. Just work forward, make sure you cover up all your thread. Making sure you got a nice taper. As you get to your hackle, you're just going to work around it. Leaving it there, and then you get to your wing. Fold your wing back. Put some dubbing right in front. Put a little more dubbing, just kind of figure, well, not necessarily figure eight, but really sandwich that wing in between some wraps of dubbing. Looks like I measured my dubbing out pretty well. Finishing up, if you have extra, just peel it off. I've got a little bit of room here behind the eye to finish. Filled in everywhere. Got a nice taper. Now I'm ready to do my hackle. And I'm just going to spiral my hackle forward. Doesn't have to be super tight wraps of hackle. I'm going to get probably 5 or 6 wraps of hackle in here. When I've done 3 behind the wing, I'll come up to the wing and go right in front. Do 1, 2, 3, and then I'll tie off my hackle by holding it forward and sneaking my thread behind it. Do that a couple of times before I let go. And I'll trim off my excess hackle. If you have saddle hackle, you'll probably have enough hackle left over for another fly. I don't with this neck hackle. Now put just a couple more wraps of thread there to make sure that tied down well. And now we can do our whip finish. Right behind the eye. At this point, it's probably a good time after you trim off your thread to put a little head cement on there to make sure the fly lasts longer. In the interest of time, I'm going to not do that. Clean up my wing just a little bit, top of my wing. You can cut it down at an angle if you want to have it more of a mayfly shape. And then you're basically finished. One thing you can do is sneak underneath the fly, trim out some fibers right in the middle on the bottom. And that'll give you a little open spot that allows the fly to land and center itself on the water, and also exposes more of the bottom of the fly so the fish see the bottom of the fly. And there you go. A great dry fly pattern to imitate adult mayflies. We use this pattern a lot in this bluing olive color scheme like we used here to imitate the bluing olive, aka Baetis adults on our streams, and we also use the pale morning dun version quite a bit, but you can change the color to suit the mayfly you're matching. A very versatile pattern from John Barr. So we just finished tying the Vis-a-Dun. I'm Hans from Dakota Angler and Outfitter. Check out our other patterns at flyfishsd.com.